So in our first meetup, like I said, we talked about what this Design Your Life meetup is going to be about. And what it's about is that we're going to use, um, we're going to use 52, the ideas that we learned in 52 Living Ideas, um, and how to apply it in our lives. And we're also going to learn some new concepts, like Jing is going to teach us today, as well as Joe, um, about different ways that we can design your life. But we want this to be practical, and we want this to have a practical meaning on your life. That means you can apply what you've learned in today's meetup and then future meetups. You can apply it to your life. So, just a quick overview of what we did last week. I have notes. So, Joe started, and we briefly went through what we have studied in the past, which is systems thinking, Carl Jung, the Bhagavad Gita, the Gospel of John, the Tao Te Ching, Rand Design Way, um, and other ideas in the past 2 years that 52 Living Ideas has been online. Um, and we looked at how we incorporate our ideas into everyday life. And Joe talked about stoicism and the dichotomy of control. He said that it had an effect on his thoughts and actions. That he realized that the only thing that he had control over is his thoughts and actions, and everything else was outside of his realm of control. He said that learning about stoicism has had results on his own, has resulted in better relationships, and he's able to look internally when he gets upset about something and check and see why he gets upset about that. Joe, did you want to add anything really quick, like any major point before I move on?
Just that I do link that to the Bhagavad Gita and how those two things in particular have been able to be integrated in a practical way in my activities. That's all.
Okay. And then I went next, so I'll talk about what I talked about, which was one of the first authors I talk about is Louis Sullivan, and Form Follows Function. And I look at why I'm taking the action that I'm taking. And the example that I used in the meetup is rest. And we also learned about this in Bhagavad Gita as well. I looked at, why am I resting? Am I resting because I've had a hard day or a hard week and I just kind of need that moment to just chill and refuel? If that's the case, then I enjoy my rest. I have a good time, and, I don't feel guilty or anything about it. But if I'm avoiding something, avoiding a difficult task or avoiding, attacking and doing something, then I look at, why am I avoiding it? Is it something new? Am I scared? If I'm scared, what am I scared of? Like, what do I fear? And so looking at that, I was able to realize that, what I what I was fearing was not knowing. What I was fearing was failing. Those were the two major ones. So when I looked at it, I was just like, well, if you're going to fail, just do it and get back up. So those are the things that I learned. And then I learned about the concept of love versus fear. And I learned if my actions were out of love or out of fear, what I learned in the past almost 2 years um, is that I was acting mostly out of fear. And what 52 Living Ideas has offered me through the Gita, through the Gospel of John, is that I want to choose love, because people are going to hurt you anyway. But you can control, like Joe said, you can control your thoughts and your actions. And I could get hurt. Absolutely, I can. But what's the worst thing? I get hurt or I live in fear. I choose to love and not live in fear. And then human versus divine, and I learned this in the Gospel of John and the Gita, and the center versus periphery. And what 52 Living Ideas have offered is that I get to the core of who I am as a human being, and like I get to the core of who I want to be in this world. Um, so those are mine. And then Jane, she said the first things that she talks about was group sharing, in that, being in 52 like living ideas allows her to do a group share, and learning from people in this group, and learning from different ideas. Instead of trying to learn everything on your own, you can learn from each other. Um, and then she said, then her next major point was about Jordan Peterson, order and chaos. Um, and she learned that between the order and the chaos is where you grow. And then she talks about Carl Jung and the personality types. Um, and think, like, being a thinker, and getting along with feelers, because there's a balance. Um, and then from the Gita, she says, she talks about the yoga and different spiritual pursuits, and she talked about how she was going to church and not getting anything, but she did get something spiritually from the Gita. And then the design way, which Jing did an excellent presentation every week when we were studying the book, Design Way. And she learned how to build systems in her life with intention, and to create flow in her work. Jing, do you want to add anything before I move on to the next part?
No, that's great. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. And then we had different people share. And if you want to learn, if you want to see the whole meetup, you can go to 52 Living Ideas. I can also post it in the chat. That way you can get to it. But what we talked about is what people wanted to learn about. And this is kind of how this came up. This came up from the last meetup. People wanted to get to their values and what they want to know, what they want to hold to their core. Um, Brian, I'm putting you on the spot because I know you talked about, um, it was something, it was a book that you were talking about, or a lesson that you taught at a college course, and I can't find my notes on that. So my apologies. But Brian, can you talk about that for like a couple minutes?
Yeah, the book is True North. It's written by somebody named George. His last name, I think, is George. But he was the CEO of Medtronics, a big, and I'd say successful medical device business. And at some point, he decided to move on and to focus more on, well, he'd always been focused in his work on what's important in his life, and he thought he would try to articulate that and share it with others. And he worked at the Harvard Business. He went to Harvard Business School then as a professor, and did it with put together this approach with a psychologist. And the book itself gives a kind of a upfront a rough and ready framework, and then several vignettes throughout the book. Really, people who have looked to business or politics as a way to express their values. And it's not just values in some theoretical sense, something that was really brought home to them in their lives, that they really took on as they shaped that in often very bad experiences or obvious deficiencies, and shaped them into a mission that they were able to translate into some business or political activity. The one reservation I had on the book, of course this is for the business school, but the reservation I had is most of the people were very well known and very successful. And I really don't think that's not where most of us are headed. And honestly, I don't think that's what the book is about. So you need to kind of abstract from the celebrity of it all and see what these people were thinking, and in the beginnings of their careers when they were not successful or important. They'd already, this is, I guess, a key thing, committed to some path based on this value, again, a value that has been derived from experience. And they did all that before, as I said, before they were celebrities. So that's that kind of put the students in the right frame of mind to take a look at all these vignettes. the model is, looks like it's very similar to the one you've got up here. He put up, to think, he had it's called True North, the book. I have it in the room. I'll go next room. I'll go pull it out. But he's got, instead of 3 circles, he's got 4 circles, like the 4 cardinal points on a compass. There's no real reason to have any one of them pointing towards the north. They're just the 4 different directions. And as one of them is, I'm just going to sketch, see if I can recapture this. One of that is community. Another one is family. One of the cardinal directions is family. Business. And maybe the last one, forget what, it might have been, I forget what it was, but it was, let's just say it's personal. But then in the middle of it all, there's a 5th circle. That's the center of it all, is you. And the challenge in each of these vignettes was to look at this person as an example and see, what's the experience that gave rise to their direction. And along the way, we talked about what is the nature of commitment. Even the title of this, design your life, I would put a question mark around life, or after life, because I don't think you can design a whole life, unless it's a very short one. And I don't know if each of you looks back in your past, I would guess you're not doing exactly what you had designed or intended. I know that's true for me, but anyway, design your life. So they had a commitment. It was just that's the other thing about commitments. They tend to be, maybe properly viewed, and Jordan Peterson went off on this a bit, as somewhat tentative. They need to be reviewed and corrected. That's also in the OODA loop, reviewed and corrected as you basically move from a state of ignorance. You choose a path, but as you hit on the path, you're definitely going to have things you don't know. And you learn things along the way, so you adjust your commitment and your path. Well, in any event, you look at these, that was a bit of a footnote. You look at these different spheres of life, and you decide what's it, who are the kind of, if you will, if you're already at that place, who are the players there? If you don't have the players, who are going to be the players? What direction are you going to go with family, business, your personal priorities? And then you've captured that, I think, with health in your schema, and then community. But you look at all 4 of those, you think, what are the values that you want to capture or express in each of them? And then here's a key thing. It's how are you going to do that? And then setting priorities. That is, I think, a key thing to think about as you look at these values. And that's, I think, one of the benefits of having it broken out in 4 directions or in 3 spheres. There's going to be to achieve a balance, you're going to have to reconcile the various values in these different spheres of life, and it has to do with things like time, money, effort. What are you going to focus on, and then what, if you will, what you consider most important. So in my class, it was for students, and a lot of them were struggling with their career choices. So that was really a thread that I followed through the semester, and that focuses, if you will, on business. And that's already a pretty big challenge, is to come up with even a tentative career choice, just one that's hypothetical or for current working purposes. A lot of students are very cautious and tentative about that kind of commitment, but you know, the one thing I pointed out is you're missing out opportunities if you don't. You might be missing opportunities if you don't try something, and then secondly, you can always change. So it's not always a lifetime commitment. In fact, I think, for example, in finance, people tend to discount severely anything that happens after the 5th year. And that, I'd say that's the way things tend to roll in life. So anyway, you take these 4 different spheres. I had them focus, first of all, on business or their career and try to come up with a career choice. And then they thought through, you know, ultimately, what's that going to be like in, let's say, 5 or 10 years? What's it going to be like in 5 and 3, and what's it going to be like in 1 year? And now, what are the things you're going to commit to in the next year, or you know, the next semester, given this career choice? And then I asked them to look at these other spheres of their life and to realize that, you know, that it's kind of like they say in the Gita, you inevitably you're going to be confronted with these other spheres. It's not all work, and you don't want it to be all work. And so how are you going to integrate these other parts into your life? And since we started with business, how are you going to integrate it into this, with this career? How are you going to make it work? But you could just as well, as I said in class, turn the dial, and you could start with family as the first thing. And, you know, how do you want your family to work, and how that might be the most important thing. And then you design your commitments to business, career, and let's say personal health around that, or personal health, and then would be the top thing. And how do you design around that? So those were, that was towards the end of the semester when we talked about those sorts of things. But I think a big thing is realizing that there are different spheres. They tend to be, is captured in this approach, in different relationships. Not, you know, that's not a bad approach. And and you're necessarily going to have some conflicts, some different demands on your time and other resources, and how you balance those through setting priorities is really going to maybe be the most important expression of your values. So that's a quick rundown of what that course was like.
Thank you, Brian. Which actually leads greatly into what Geng is going to present and Joe is going to present. So, Geng, I'm going to turn it over to you. Oh wait, I'm sorry, I forgot. I forgot to go through the flow of the meetup. Can you go back one, Geng? Sorry.
Okay.
So just really quick, how it's going to flow tonight. I forgot to do that part. So like it says, an introduction, and then Geng is going to give a 10-minute presentation on the book, The Next 5 Moves. And then after that, Joe is going to give a presentation on values clarification. And then after that, we're going to have questions and comments on what was presented. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms. And then we're going to have clarifying questions. We're going to have questions for the breakout rooms. And then we're going to come back after that for like 15 to 20 minutes. And then we'll come back for a discussion. And then we'll ask you guys for takeaways or any suggestions on what you want to see. So now, sorry, Geng, now you can move forward.
Okay. Yes, thanks, Brian. I think, yeah, there are a lot of what Brian talking about is very similar to what we discussed. I think there's different approach to this, but it's all overlap. So we talked about last month about this our intention, and we want to start with why, because we want to. I think it's important to know what we want to accomplish, why we do this self-development before we even started. And I happened to read this book called The Next 5 Moves, and I found there's a lot of coincidence between this and self-development. And they mentioned about the why 5 moves is about the business, because the writer was inspired by this documentary about this chess player, and he always have 12 moves ahead, grandmaster. And many people, and they also mentioned Elon Musk, also a good chess player. He can always think things 12 moves ahead. But for this book, they mentioned most people only think 1 or 2 moves ahead of, which is a mature level of player. I think like the chess, our life as well, we have to have more, why we have visionary who can accomplish more in life. I think it's very important to have more, more planned ahead of time, instead of just go with it. So this book is talk about taking vision and mindset of chess master applied to business. And if you don't have more than 1 move ahead to drive, you will mostly drive by ego, emotion, and fear. So you will easily intimidate by the difficulty of things happen in front of you if you don't have longer vision. So this helped the writer himself transform from hot-tempered, insecure, cocky health club salesman to a strategic, self-aware, confident CEO. So I think this book is quite interesting. Another interesting thing is this book, another book I'm reading called Be Better at Everything. And both of these people, they never go to college. So I found a lot of people, we talk a lot about philosophy, and I found a lot of people who are learning from school of life, and they have a lot of practical advice. I found it quite interesting. I think we need to learn a lot of philosophy. At the same time, we need to learn practical skills from people actually learn those from their real life. So then they mentioned why there's 5 moves, because there is a sweet spot for strategy and action. When you think too many moves, you easily lead to the paralysis by analysis. We learned through the comprehensionism. When you think too much, you're overwhelmed. And this 5 moves also enough to help you anticipate future and seeing moves and counter moves. And also mention the lack of planning, the enthusiastic, usually you win down. But when you have sequence of these 5 moves, it will usually last longer. So he also mentioned business has a path for everyone. As long as you have self-awareness, willingness to think 5 moves ahead, so you can be successful. And then he mentioned about, I found this quite interesting. He mentioned about the master strategic. We all can become, we have to train ourselves to think strategically. And talking about unique values, I found this is quite interesting, this diagram. So there's a purpose, value, vision, I don't know, swapped, priorities, strategies, and action plans. And I think we, in a lot of discussion, we mostly focus on the center part. And right now we try to go further to the action, from the idea to action. I think that's the goal of this meetup. So this mentioned how business people work, to think like master strategics. It's important to identify who you want to be and your legacy you want to create. And in these 5 moves, they actually start with master knowing yourself. And this is today's meeting focus on. So we are not focused on the other ones. And master knowing yourself is who you want to be, what you want out of life. And this is a process, like Brian and other people said, design your life doesn't mean you have a fixed design, you never change it. It's a progress. It's like you started somewhere, and I think it always goes with action, then paralyzed, not doing anything. You can go one direction, it doesn't work, you come back, at least you know that direction is wrong. Then you can go a different direction. So design is constant process. It's very important to be honest to yourself, to find out the deepest desire. And it's important, this will help you when things get tough. If you know what you want, things will get tough, but if you understand, then you have enough drive to keep going. And they also mentioned that make pain you feel. And a lot of people they mentioned become cynical because they aim low, then they aim low and play safe, because when you get difficult, if you don't have a clear goal, then it easily become, like just give up. A greatness comes from vision and plan to achieve greatness. We may not all want to be great, but I think the important thing is we have to decide who we want to be and try to be that. Then that will bring us happiness. I think that's very important. In this book, I also mentioned people have different goals. Like this guy's friend, his goal is be financial free. So, and the writer himself, he wants to leave a legacy. So he worked super hard and he wants to grow his business, but his friend just want to have passive income. So people have different goals. There's no right or wrong. You just need to find out and do what really make you happy, fulfill your vision. So when you find the cause or dream, something greater than yourself, you will find enthusiasm, passion, and joy, make your life a great adventure. I think that's the purpose, the reason we are doing this, because I find a lot of people live life very passively, and you don't have that energy, you don't have that joy. It's a waste. We all want to live lively, and we see people who live lively, who can bring the passion to life, because they're aligned, their vision, their goal, and their action. And then this author's personal story, how he transformed from a person who's aimless to have very clear goal for himself. Because his personal tragedy, his father, he born from very poor family, and his father ended up have health care through social program, and they treat him very badly, and he died or something. And at that time, he decide he has to, make enough money to support his family. He doesn't treat that badly. And also when he worked very hard for, the leader didn't keep the promise to promote him as he is, then he actually decided to not let other people control his life. So he has made a lot of based on his own personal experience, he make all these decisions, what he wants to accomplish in his life. And this also remind me about the movie King Richard. I don't know if you guys see it. I saw it's quite interesting. The funny thing is, and just recently, I think the second daughter win the champion again. And this movie is quite interesting. The guy always talking about, I have a plan. It's quite amazing how he was able to accomplish so much with his kids, with very little, hardly any resources. And it's all fulfilled even after he died, long time. So I found this really shows the importance to have great vision, plan to achieve the greatness. Believe in your vision, and you will find enthusiasm, passion, joy. But not everybody maybe want to achieve it, but those people really inspire us because they see what is possible. And then they mentioned the most important product is you. So you have to understand who you are. Actually, I have this theory. I think we all salesperson. So we sell ourselves to society through our job. We sell ourselves to others through marriage. That's my theory. It may sound very funny, but I found it's so in order to sell the product, you have to understand your product. Everybody have their own uniqueness. You can't, you have to know what's your strength, what's your weakness. And then you have to market your product based on your product strengths, either for work or for family life, during the dating time. So I have a lot of theory with those, but maybe we can talk about that later in the relationship, area. But discover what role suits you best, embody who you want to be, and living your future truth. This I found quite interesting. I never did that, but I read a lot of books mention that, and it makes a lot of sense. They mentioned about somebody lost their job and they were looking for it. But then this guy, he actually dressed up every day like he's going to work. Then he carry his suitcase, go somewhere and do things. And he found a job very quickly. I think it's quite interesting how psychologically life works, because when you actually in that future position, psychologically, you will act accordingly, then you will be very employable. Think about another person when he's lost his job, very frustrated, stay home, not doing anything, not dressed up, then he will have less chance to get a job, or even when he get a job, he have less chance to succeed because it's hard transition from that relaxed stage. So I see a lot of books mention that, how you live in your future truth, but I haven't practiced. Maybe I will try later. So use your heroes and visual to remind you who you want to be. And this guy actually, that's the painting he commissioned an artist to draw. That's all his heroes. And he's standing next to them in this picture. I found this quite interesting. He hung in his office. So, so study the most important product knowing who you want to be is a process that requires effort. It takes a lot of effort to understand ourselves, and it's most valuable knowledge we need. Align your career with your true self. And this diagram actually shows a lot of possible careers you could do. You can be an entrepreneur, an intrapreneur, support team, solopreneur, influencer, CEO, sales, inventor. So it's there's a different route you can choose. Whatever aligns with who you are, make you happy. When you're honest about who you are, you learn to stop wanting everything and not envy other success. I found this is quite interesting. He mentioned about envy is both extreme ambitious and extremely lazy. So I think they also mentioned when you're very clear what you want, then you can make a choice. You have less problem make a choice, because just like Brian said, there's a conflict always between different values. Sometimes you have to choose. You can choose to travel around the world or stay with your kids. That's your choice sometimes. Unfortunately, we can't have both. I always wish that we have different bodies can do different things at the same time. And they also mentioned about different level of consciousness, and from the contract to the expense. So this is higher consciousness. This is very interesting diagram. Your vision must align with who you want to be. Your choice must align with your vision. Your effort must align with the size of your vision, and your behavior must align with your value and principle. So I think because when you're clear who you want to be, then all this action will be easier, decision easier to make, because it's all aligned together. Self-inquiry leads to acceptance, which leads to power. It's mentioned about a lot of time people self-criticize. And they mentioned actually the self-acceptance is higher than courage. So if you can accept yourself, you actually achieve the freedom. So find out your drive, either financial freedom, greatness, or whatever. And then they actually give you some tools for self-discovery. It's a personal audit in 4 category. I found this is quite interesting. So basically in this 4 area, advancement, madness, purpose, individuality, and there's different things, and you can find out which one really what you cares. So so usually you may have more than one, and it's changed during your life too. There are 4 reasons may trigger you to reassess what drives you. And they also mentioned this, what drives you changes during your life too. When you actually, your consciousness evolve with your experience. So when you get bored, you experience all this, then it's a time for you to evaluate all this. Personally, I found what I found interesting is, to me, it's the advancement is completing a task. Madness is kind of like have control over things, and the purpose is make a change or impact, and an individual is maybe lifestyle. And there's a 4 level why this book shared. I found it's quite interesting. The lower is survival, status, freedom, then purpose. I personally found myself in the freedom area. Obviously, the purpose is higher area, higher level of why. And how do you want to remember? What do you want to make impact in other people's lives? And that's driven by history, helping others, change, impact, enlightenment. And then they actually, this is quite interesting. This maybe take a while, but we can just skip through it. So this personal audit is very interesting. He said it takes a lot of time for him to go through all this, and it's really worth it. It's really help you clarify who you want to be.
For the Russians on the North Bank, they're going to get hungrier.
So there's all this personal audit. I can post online later if you guys want to try that out. So the benefit of self-discovery and conduct this personal audit is be aware. The awareness shows that you are the center of all your problems and also the solution. So then you realize your problem can be fixed. Is you crank your limiting beliefs. By spotting patterns, you can end detrimental habit. Your anger at others die out once you see no one but you can choose your fate. So also study your blind spot by actively looking for them. Knowing yourself is an effort process, and it's really worth to do it. So you need to understand who you are, what makes it takes, how much risk you can handle, what type of family you want to create. You need to be honest. Once you become clear about most important product, your decision will flow naturally and lead you to accomplish your goal. So this is end of the summary of the book I read in the first section about clarify who you want to be. And I found this quite insightful. I have to go through all those audit myself, but I found it's important to know that. For me, I found the most important thing is freedom. That's why, I choose to have my own business, and so I can do work and take care of my kids when I need to, and I can be efficient when I want to. And and in family life too, I have a lot of freedom. So that's what I found I value. So around life and work, that's what I focus on. Maybe I will evolve to the next level, purposeful life later. I think that may be the reason I want to go back to look at this, because I think at a certain point you really want to evolve, improve your life in certain ways, make it more meaningful, I guess. So that's the summary of my presentation. So I will hand out to Joe he will use Stoic to help us more clarify this question. Joe.
Hey, thanks, Chang. I'm gonna stop sharing the screen. There we go. Now I can see everyone's lovely face. I have a couple slides that I'll share in a moment, but I'm just going to speak basically about the exercise for a few minutes that we'll do in the breakout room. Basically, it's a values clarification exercise, and I thought it was an excellent approach to getting insight into myself in the course of during a course that I was taking on Socrates. And essentially, I thought a very good example would have been, I had a very good friend, and this is one person who hadn't clarified their values, very talented individual, who went to Stanford undergrad, Stanford Law School.
Now, give me 1 second. I'm going to mute everybody.
And he basically said that it was really kind of amazing that he had worked his whole life to get into one of these firms, and he got in there and everybody was actually trying to get out, and he realized he hated it. And what he did is he never really accounted for what he really wanted to do, what his values were, what his goals were. All through school, they really didn't talk to him about that. So a lot of the values that were imposed on him were basically from external sources, whether it be his parents or his friends or things along those lines. But values clarification exercises have been used also within cognitive behavioral therapy to help with behavioral change. So it's ensuring that what you value and your actions are aligned with one another. So, for example, you go through a series of questions that allow you to get to what maybe you basically is the underlying value. And it takes deep work sometimes, but I'll give a simple example that we could use that I think would that will help everybody understand the objective of the exercise. So if you ask yourself, why do I go to work? Well, you go to work to make money. Well, why are you making money? Well, I would make money to support my family. Now, if you have to think about it, maybe then your underlying value is your family. And you have to prioritize your values in order to, determine where you're best going to spend your time. So what is it that you really are, and that's what the whole point of the exercise is. What are your values? So you may have somebody that says they very much value their family, but they end up doing what they want. Maybe they go out to the bars at night. I have a friend that does do that, that where his actions don't align with what he's saying his values are. So in day-to-day life, we tend to forget sometimes what we value most. And if we identify what we value, maybe we'll start to reconsider our actions or reconsider our values in certain cases. So I think that that's a very good example. And for me personally, this would have been something that I wish I had done a little bit earlier in my career, where I took a step back and I had a goal of working at some consulting firms. And, I was always told that the people that worked at Big Four consulting firms, they end up doing what they want. And I got into those firms and nothing could be further from the truth. But if I'd walked through this exercise and actually thought about what is it that I really want to do? What is it that I really value? I would have probably taken a different direction with both my life and my career. So I think that it's a worthwhile exercise. Now, what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and share a couple of slides. And what we'll do is go to a breakout room where we can discuss some of these questions. And basically, these questions are only to get the conversation going. The real question I would like everyone to ask themselves is, how do you determine what your values are? Because it's a really important thing to ask yourself. And do your actions align with your values? So let me just share for a moment some of the questions. And again, these are not meant to be, oh, that's not good. There we go. These are just some questions, and I'll put them in the chat for you as to, you can discuss in your breakout rooms. Ultimately, what is the most important thing in your life, or in life to you? What do you really want your life to stand for or be about? Again, these are questions just to get you started. What sort of things do you most want to spend your life doing? Where do you want to allocate your time? So once you get to the answers of some of these questions here, that there's another part of the exercise. Then who are the people that you admire most? Because sometimes that helps you identify your own personal values. So you can develop what would be, once you understand what your values are, you can start to use maybe ideal characters, either imagined or real, that help you at least have an idea of the ideal And when you're starting to develop an ideal, you start to have something to shoot for. So if you were a Stoic, I mean, usually, generally, it's somebody like Socrates, but it can be much more practical than that. Again, I will share a lot of these. I will share all these in the chat before we go to our breakout room. But again, these are things that are used in modern psychological cognitive behavioral therapy, and that have proven to really help with people with behavioral change. The other thing that's interesting about this exercise is to really think about the contradictions in your values. So one of the things that, if I were to answer, what is the most important thing in my life? And let's just say, for example, I put stoicism and virtue. And then I put physical health as another value. And I rank those two values between 1 and 10. Well, if I ranked my physical well-being above my stoicism, technically, Stoics don't see physical health as something as a prerequisite for happiness. And so there would be a contradiction in those two things. So they essentially, Stoics, obviously, for those that of you that are aware of the Stoic philosophy, that virtue is sufficient, is necessary and sufficient for a happy life. I'm using that is the most basic example that I could probably provide, where there was a contradiction between two values that you listed. But sometimes what you'll see is there's contradictions in what you put down and how you rank them. But that's pretty much all I wanted to share. So I'll put the questions in the chat, and we'll go into breakout rooms.
Okay.
Dave, go ahead. You should be able to unmute. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Joe, Geng, and Evanique, and Brian. To me, the most important thing is trying to find where you should be. And I really miss, because I was in school 50 years ago, I think now they call it a skills inventory and an interest inventory, to find out what direction you really should be going in life. Because you think, well, who you admire? Well, that's great. I admire Michael Jordan and I admire Michael Jackson. But that's necessarily mean that's the direction I want to go in life. So I'm fairly fortunate. I worked out pretty well being an engineer for the phone company. But looking back, I really think I would have been better as a psychologist or something like that, because I really enjoy helping people. The other thing is Maslow's hierarchy of needs has been very instructive to me. And also, I think Carl Jung's observation that first half of life is just working, like caterpillar going to work every day and eating the leaves and doing all that wonderful stuff. The second half of life is a time to examine kind of where we go from here, living a whole life, things like that, which I really have enjoyed with the virus, with all these opportunities of Zoom to learn things I never would have dreamed I would be learning. And also the comment I'd make, I think we have a tendency to want to go to the top of the pyramid, but there's a lot of room for workers in the bottom of the pyramid. And, we're not always going to be at the peak. Although we're kind of in this celebrity society, everybody wants to be at the peak of the pyramid, but may not be the right place for it. There's a lot of celebrities committing suicide, kind of an interesting observation. Anyway, good to see everybody tonight. Bye.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's never too early to really identify what your values are, because it can become too late once you identify them, if you wait on that. One of the things that was kind of you know, interesting to me that when I was going through one of these exercises, I always put friends and family as one of my core values, like one of these things that I valued over everything. And then I then when you break down what the value actually means underneath that, it was interesting because I thought about, well, is it my friends and family, or the value should be focused on being a good friend? And it kind of changed what the value actually was. So my focus was now, what is it for me to be a good friend versus actually valuing? And that was a way of valuing my friends and family, as opposed to looking at something them giving to me. I was focused on giving back to them. I never looked at it from that perspective, but once you start to question the value itself, like why is it and what is it that you exactly appreciate, and what is it your role in that interaction, it's important. And also another way of doing this is just looking at your roles and letting your roles dictate you know, your actions. But again, let's hear what Jules, is it? Jules?
Hey, thank you. So I really appreciated Jeng's presentation. I'm new to the group, but
Welcome.
I want to say, yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be here. This really resonates with what I need and where I'm at. So, well, just a lot of thoughts. I really love Socrates' idea of know thyself. And I think that's kind of what you were ending with there. And definitely know thyself and know what my values are. And I think what COVID, I think the last 2-3+ years has really taught me, and probably a lot of us, is we can have our trajectory in line and our strategy and like where I want to be, when, and holy hell, lots of things can get in the way of that. And so I think for me, it's become a matter of, I mean, just for example, in Tacoma, we've had the worst air quality in the world. And I think that it's just been a lot of things that I didn't plan for, but I appreciate that emphasis on values and who I want to be and how I want to be. And even if my outward goals don't get met, like where I'm trying to go, I can still be who I want to be and still manifest and try to live the qualities of life that are valuable to me. So I appreciate both the emphasis on what are my values and where do I want to go. So I just wanted to just say that because I really appreciate this food for thought. So thank you.
I know, I appreciate the comments. Next up, we have Ella.
Just one quick note.
Yep.
Somehow it got switched off to breakout room, so I don't think I can do it until the next meetup. So we're gonna have to do like a switch.
Could you click it?
I did click it and it didn't do anything for this meetup. I think it'll only do it for future meetups. I had to check my Zoom settings on the web. For some reason it was switched off. I don't know why.
I guess we can discuss here.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big room in order to do that, and part of it kind of takes away from the intimacy that
I know. The only thing I could do is I can pause the recording and then we can run it like a big breakout room. And that way we're not being recorded.
I don't think, I mean, the recording, I'm not too worried about. It's more or less the scale. So why don't we go right to,
yeah, we send a different link.
it would be then everybody would have to join again.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Okay.
I don't know if that's ideal.
Yeah, I think we can just talk like this. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just have to figure out a way to manage this.
I can moderate, and then one of the two hosts can ask the questions, and then we'll just do the same thing that we normally do. Exclamation point or raise your hand in Zoom.
Yeah. Yeah, we can continue the momentum to have comments. Yeah.
May I make a suggestion?
Please.
Yeah.
The let's go through the comments that people are making here online. I thought Dave's comment and the last comment, maybe others. I have some preliminary comments that aren't
Okay.
fit exactly into this the framework. I do agree with you that having the more intimate setup makes for a better discussion of the kind of question you put out there. That's the way I mean, since you've already mentioned it, that's the way I did my class. I had groups of 3 students that worked together for the whole semester, and they built up some intimacy, some confidence, some trust. And I think they got a lot more out of it that way. But it sounds like this evening I think there's just some general observations that people are willing to make.
Yeah, and if there are people with general observations, I actually welcome those, and then we can comment and have an open discussion. I mean, it's just, we were going to come back to a bigger group anyway. Just sometimes people do feel a little bit more comfortable with making comments in a smaller group. But, it seems like we have enough interest here. So let's just keep it going. Ella, and then followed by Brian.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I would also agree that, I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, so excuse my voice, but I would agree that every age brings different developmental challenges, and that you can still design your life at any age and should at least put some thought into it. And I also agree with Joe, the sooner the better. I wish I could have actually had more of this instruction, as someone else said earlier on in my career. But basically, I just had a point to make, a Carl Jung point about the shadow, and how it actually is very difficult to know yourself, and that some of these irritations or qualities we may have with others may be things that we've buried within ourselves. And sometimes these things are very positive qualities. Like, I may admire someone for their artistic ability, when in fact I have it in myself and haven't developed it. I may be irritated with someone because they're, doing X or saying X, Y, or Z, but this may be because this is a part I've repressed within my own self, and I'm projecting it. And so he was just a quick thing that he says really quick, because he tends to drill down, is, what if I discover that the least among us, the poorest of all beggars, the most impudent of all offenders, is within me, and that I myself am the enemy who must be loved. I myself is the enemy who must be loved. We must condemn the anger with ourselves. And I think in looking at designing your life, and looking deeply and going through all of the exercises on the slides that you've put up, which were great, just the idea that, it can go a lot into a deeper realm, past, the ego and planning and all of that, because those may be the things that hang us up, that stall us, keep us from moving ahead. So that's just the point I want to make, and that's it.
2 quick points that I would like to follow up on with that in particular. The first one is that what we don't know within ourselves, is that something, would you say, Ella, that could be corrected by having a second independent party actually help you unearth those things that that you don't know about yourself. So friends, possibly family, or even therapists, an independent person that would help you be able to identify what your core values are, and so like understand yourself better. Because I agree with you, understanding ourselves is an incredibly difficult thing to do, to look at ourselves objectively. The second thing I would just like to, and you can respond to that in a moment, that I would like to comment about is also true. I agree with Carl Jung, what he says that, and actually, while we went over the book Maps of Meaning with Jordan Peterson, he talked about when he was actually working in a prison and had this, all of a sudden, this need, like this almost this desire to literally take the pen and stab the person in front of him. And it was just acknowledging literally that there was something in all of us that is deep and dark. And so that understanding that, we have to kind of confront that part of ourselves. It was interesting. I'm not saying we all have that. But it speaks to your point. But I was wondering, would you have any response to the first point that I was trying to make, as far as how do you really uncover your biases or your willingness to overlook certain things?
Well, I think Carl Jung, Jungian trained therapist, will do things such as strategies such as active imagination, which enables, and they're highly trained to do this activity, which may enable, according to the theory, the analsand, the person being analyzed, to through active imagination produce contents from the unconscious mind, and then the therapist can deal with those symbols and stories. The theory being that the unconscious is just as real and active and possibly more powerful and composes more of our mind than the conscious mind, which sort of filters it out for good reason. Sometimes we have to get through the day. And the other thing is, of course, dream work, working through your dreams, keeping a dream log, and they're trained to help you work through dream imagery in a professional way and see what these dreams may mean. And they may point you to goals that you may not have even have thought about. And I agree with someone else that had said earlier on that they kind of got stuck early on, and I did too, and went into a field, and mine was out of economic necessity at the time. And and I spent over 30 years in that profession. So yeah, I think the younger that you can figure some of this stuff out, the better you are, the better off you are. And but I will also say, I've talked to a lot of older people, more mature people, and they're working on a little book, or they're involved with a charity organization, or it's just having some meaning and some goal. And so you can go through these same exercises and see what the problems are. You can still look internally and do the Jungian work as much as you can, informally or formally. But I hope that helps a little.
It does.
Yeah.
I mean, there's two different, really quickly, I want to follow up one last time. These are two different approaches. Like, the Socratic method is more like of a CBT approach, which is less of, it's non, whereas the Jungian approach is more analytic in nature. So they're a little bit different, but they're both two separate ways to get to the underlying value or truth that you're searching for. Jang, you had something?
Yeah, I want to share something. So my experience, I didn't go the Jungian psychology analysis, but I found personally was really helpful to understand myself actually through the landmark training. Landmark training I found is the group of people. Actually, when other people share through their story, you actually learn a lot about yourself. For example, I joined the program because I want my kids to be more motivated because I found as a first generation immigrant, we work very hard. And I found my kids are less motivated than we are, and we kind of worried. But then I was listening to another woman who's sharing when she was learning swimming, she was as a kid, and his father just threw her into the water, and she was psychologically damaged. She was so scared, and her mom won't help her. And at that moment, I suddenly realized, maybe when kids are ready, you push them too hard, they actually got more scared. It's kind of like the order and chaos, when they are ready, they become more brave. So actually, I observed when the parents are less aggressive, the kids all very brave and aggressive. And the parents more aggressive, their kids seem to be more intimidated. Maybe because when the parents push them more, they actually stack back more. It's actually helped me to be more, aware. I think a lot of our blind spots actually, by observing others, interact with others, we learn a lot about ourselves. That's my experience.
So next up we have Brian, and then we'll have Dave share after that.
I definitely agree with it's good to try to identify the blind spots, or the dark side, the shadow, I also think of it in terms of the assumptions that you've made in life, or the assumptions you've been brought up with, or the conditions, like the conditions in which you were raised, including the expectations that you were given when you were raised. A lot of these things you're not conscious or aware of them. You just take them for granted instead of being grateful. And gratitude is one way to raise awareness. Unfortunately, I think in my experience, and some thinkers have observed that you're never going to be able to deal with all of the blind spots, all the things that you've taken for granted through psychoanalysis and the rest. It happens in real life. And that's one person who said that was Carl Jaspers, who was a very influential philosopher and psychologist and psychiatrist. He developed one of the first topographies for understanding all mental illnesses in a modern sense. It's still used today, even in the States. But and he did a lot of other, I thought, pretty impressive things. But he said, you're going to have what he called everyone will be confronted with extreme situations, and this is where you learn about yourself. It is a defining moment, as they say. And you not only learn about yourself, you become yourself. You are shaped by these moments. That's true in the little vignettes that we read in the True North book. Bill George was the person who wrote that book. The vignettes are great because they run 2 to 4 pages each. And a lot of these people who turned out to be exemplary for him had really very traumatic experiences. Oprah Winfrey was subject to sexual abuse on a continual basis by her uncle, if you can imagine. And Nelson Mandela was in prison for 20 years. and really came out with a very loving attitude towards the people who imprisoned him. These are amazing stories, amazing. Charles Schwab, I don't remember exactly how he came to it, but he wanted, I think from his family background, he wanted to help basically retail investors who didn't have access to all the information that was available in New York. So each of these had honestly, kind of traumatic experience, which I think they probably would have preferred avoiding. But it's also a defining experience and they took it to give purpose to their future life. Now, what I'm hearing from a lot of people, and I think it's true of me too, it was probably, maybe it's systematic in the United States and Western cultures, the very career-oriented cultures. You're going to have your extreme situations in respect of your career. You're going to get bloody noses and knocked down in ways you had not imagined, in ways that you take very seriously, because you were very serious about your career from the get-go. And so that, people say you regret, well, that was a defining moment. And it did give direction. It can still give direction and purpose to what you're doing in the future. And I think it probably does if you stop and think about it. So that's really, I guess, my point is there's kind of a school of hard knocks, and you could say you made a mistake and analyze that. But I think, forgiveness, learning from it, and embracing it as part of yourself, and integrating it into your story and your future and your purpose.
Actually, this book mentioned about a lot of successful people have very miserable childhood. Actually, their anger or their misery become their fuel. And then they mentioned about this realtor woman who become very successful, who trained people. He said, oh, you have a bad childhood, that's great. You have abused father, even better. So just use those anger in become your energy source. And I think it's really, the interesting I learned at Landmark, actually, it's quite funny. Everybody share their traumatic stories, and the level of traumatic story is so different. This Black woman shared her mom died, and then at her Mother's Day, somebody told her her dad killed her mom, and found the newspaper. And another Indian American woman shared, they have, their father all drinking, very abusive because they have very traumatic childhood. And everybody tolerate them because they understand it. So, and it's just, and then another person shared their traumatic story is like, during the Christmas Day, they want this Michael Jackson poster, and the father ended up buying a jigsaw puzzle inside the poster, and he wasn't happy. Then the father said, go back to your room. That's a traumatic story. So it's interesting, this, the different level of traumatic they experience, but it's all damage people similarly. I think to the person, when you live a comfortable life, very simple things could damage you as well. If you're living through a hard life, you can actually, it's a gift a lot of time because you know how to endure. There's a lot of difficulties.
Yeah, just one thing to add to that is that I think I heard it from Oprah Winfrey. It's like no one comes out of childhood unscarred. So I think in this life, you are always you're going to get knocked down. Brene Brown talks about it in Daring Greatly. And she gives this speech about the arena. And in the arena, you get beat up, you get bloodied, you get bruised, you get damaged. But, it's not the critic that counts. It's you being in there. And even when you get knocked down, you can either use it, like you have two choices. You could like you said, people used it to fuel them and to make them successful. and to be the successful person that they wanted to be, or you could just let it defeat you. Like, which one are you going to choose? And that's the power. The power is in the choice. And even Landmark talks about it. It's, one person shares about having cancer, and they say, choose the cancer, because that's what's so. You choose it, and you choose it powerfully, and then you can have it treated powerfully, and then you can move on. So I think it's choosing. Like, you can't choose what happens to you. You can choose how you deal with it.
So we have 2 people, I believe, waiting to speak. Evanique?
3. You have 3. You have Julia, Dave, and Judy.
Okay, so why don't we go with Julie first, and then followed by Dave and Judy, and then Ella.
Hi.
Sure.
My mom knew from the time she was 2 what her purpose was, and it was with music, and that saved her from an abusive childhood. She went to New York when women didn't go, and played opposite men like Ray Milland, Eddie Albert, Forrest Tucker. And through decade after decade of my life, I watched, and later on, she taught at colleges. I saw God when she was in her element. There was no fear. Now, she had 5 husbands and she had issues, but when she was doing what she loved, it was bigger than her fear. I think children are naturally in touch with what their truth is, and I think that our society trains them out of their own truth, and people are doing things for the wrong reasons, and they're doing the grass is greener blame game, more is better, and that's not where the answers are. And if you Chimera, the other lectures, the Chimera, I don't know how to say his name, but he talks a lot about getting back to our authentic truth through inquiry and things like that. Myself, my biggest, I realized that I chose everything with my brain. I've been in my head, and that's not the place to go for career decisions. It's not the place to go when your parents die and you want some strength or comfort. And so there I was feeling like my internal GPS really what was off, and me being in my late 50s. And how do I find it at this? There's another place that I wasn't accessing, and I would call that the intuition, the still small voice. Can I wake up a dormant quality like that? So I did a purpose discovery program in the fall, and surprisingly, there was 90 people from all over the world. The ages were 50 and up, because that people, there's an inner drive. We all have gifts, and we have strengths. And if we honor them, I think it really does get down to it's bigger than the fear. And I think fear is what corrupts the society. And if we can become aware of when we're coming from fear and when we're coming from love, that's a starting point. I thought it was good what who said that acceptance is bigger than courage. I really see that my self-acceptance is where been a big problem. Me beating myself up has never helped. And so I'm trying to and then last law of attraction, she talks about the place of the problem is not the same place as the answer. We've all been at that receptive mode where we've had inspiration, and we found answers, and it's a different place. Einstein said that, I guess. So law of attraction says, says whatever you got to do to get in that place, whatever activities, whatever people, that's the most important thing you should do every day, because when you're in that place, the answers will come. And back in my 30s with all my issues, I often thought if I could just clarify my values, the fear would be a moot point. And so I'm spending my time trying to discover at this late age by doing what helps me. And last, I'll just say, Les Brown, go on the internet. He has a formula for getting back aligned with your purpose and living a life free of fear, and he has it broken down into steps. And so I suggest anybody who would like to find out more about that, watch, go to how do you say his name, Joe? Chimera, Chimera, the Asian guy that speaks.
Yasuhiko Kimura.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
Yasuhiko. Okay, all
yeah.
right. Forgive me.
I
I
suggest,
didn't know. Yeah.
I suggest Les Brown and Kimura Yasubiko. Thanks.
Now, and then that's a very important point that you just made, is that there are various ways to determine your values. I was just throwing some ideas out there. I mean, there are people that have approached this from a whole set of, of different approaches, whether it be, I know Jang had mentioned Landmark, and I know that other people have used other groups as well that have helped them, kind of clarify what is most meaningful to them. But I think the key is to really figure that out. Otherwise, again, you start to get, if you don't figure out your values, somebody will figure out for you.
And I think that, where our true power lies is how we respond to anything. And are we going to let the situation make us bitter or better? And that's what we have power over. We don't have power over other people. We don't have power over a lot of stuff that people spend their whole lives wasting.
Yeah, I think
And
being self-responsible is very important. I actually think a lot of today's, we like blame everything to society, to a society change is good, but for personal level, I think it's damaging when you blame everything. You deal with the situation you have and how you make best out of it. That's my opinion. That's make you powerful to deal with your life instead of like, oh, my life is miserable because this and this and that. Then you can't do anything.
Dr. Phil helps the situation because he asks people, how's that working for you? It's like, if you're getting the same thing over and over again, you got to eventually look at your common denominator, and maybe you need to take a look at what you're operating off of blindly.
So, Evanique, who did you have next? And then we'll go to Dave, then.
I have Dave actually is next, Judy and Ella.
Okay.
Yeah, I was really fascinated by Brian talking about forcing students to work together in small teams. And over the course of a semester, they learn to trust each other and work together. To me, it's a communication thing. Had a marriage of 13 years, a second marriage of 4 years. Both of them, we worked with psychologists or counselors, and we couldn't break down and overcome our problems. I've been in a veterans group about 15 years, and we've revealed some things about each other. I've been doing the Zoom stuff a couple of years now with several of you, and know a little bit here or there, but I call it, we're wearing a mask. And one of the first self-help books I read was called, Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am? And I think the author's father, James Powell, I think was his name, the Catholic priest. But it's terrible, but we live in this great fear that somebody's going to find out how screwed up I am. And so I'm going to pretend and, either buy fancy clothes or buy a fancy car or buy a fancy house and pretend to be somebody else or something. But to me, that's a big problem for society. Is I don't know if we can form small groups and work with each other and help each other out. But to me, that's one of our biggest problems. Very good session tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting. And we were actually just in a session about courage, right, and the importance of it. So that's not only that you go through the process of understanding yourself and your values, but it's the courage to actually live out those values. And sometimes that's just as big a challenge. So Judy, I believe you're next. Need to unmute. So we'll go to Ella, and then Judy, you can whenever you get it. Oh, there you are.
Oh, sorry, something popped up. Okay.
Sure.
Very interesting discussion. So, I'm really enjoying everything everybody's saying. So I'm really not probably going to add a whole lot new, but just some takes on the things I heard. So about the trauma discussion that was going on, I think that's really interesting, especially someone said, we even all of us, none of us escaped childhood without some trauma, right? So but how they affect us can be sometimes just as bad. Like, so you might evaluate one trauma, from the outside as being smaller than another person's larger trauma, and yet for that person, it can affect them almost the same, So I think sometimes large traumas do help people to step out and just reset and see things differently. And when people are dealing with smaller traumas or biases that they don't recognize in themselves because they're fed by our narrow worlds, each of us has a small narrow socioeconomic space that we live in. Different spaces different people live in, but each of ours is fairly narrow. So unless we dip into other people's stories or fiction or movies, I think that's why we like that, or hearing things, it's harder for us to see our biases. We kind of need to see that if we don't have large experiences ourselves that identify those things for us. I did get the book just today from the library, Your Next 5 Moves. So I read a few pages before the meetup. And the thing that I had difficulty with was the part about the anger being the impetus for designing your future or figuring out your values or motivating you. Because in my life, I found that anger is more of an impediment, and it's when you release the anger and you get beyond and you can look beyond that you can move. So I just wanted to mention that. And then I just was thinking as I was listening, I wonder how these struggles were different before we were so global, when social and family groups were smaller and they were very narrow, so that the values we got were from our families, but there were no contradictions out there. And so we absorbed those values. I'm asking, I'm not saying, I'm just wondering if we absorb those values without as much struggle as maybe people go through today. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'd like to respond first. Yeah, this book may not be the most self-discovery book. I just happened to read that book, and to some people, I think then they have experienced a lot of bad experience. Maybe that's the trigger for them to reach that, get into action. But for other people, maybe it's a different route. And well, sorry, what's your second question?
Am I unmuted now? I think I'm still unmuted. Did I have a second question? Just my question was whether when places or times when people did not have so many diverse ideas.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'd like to respond to this one, because I found a lot of my friends whose daughter, like the high school kids, and they all ask for psychiatrist. They all want to be treated. And I was wondering why, I don't remember that happened during my, when I was that age. I think the problem is the world changed so much globally, and you see so many different things, and also influenced by a lot of images on the Instagram, all this other stuff. I think girls are more sensitive than boys mostly, and they're easily impacted by those things. And they don't really have, like you said, the smaller family have very stable value. It's easy to pass on to next generation. The struggle is that when you have different value, then you may struggle because they're forced this onto you. Today, you have all the freedom to make your own choice. But at the same time, it's also very confusing. I can imagine, for the young kids, you're exposed to so many possibilities, but it's also confusing. That's my guess. That's my understanding. I think it's actually more challenging for the young people to make a choice. Just like too much freedom, sometimes it's maybe not good. You have this paralysis analysis. Like that's maybe why Trader Joe was successful, because they were able to help you screening the product instead of like you go to this grocery store with hundreds of choices and you're totally confused what to choose and waste all your time looking through them. That's my understanding. Anybody else want to share?
No, actually, why don't we go to Ella and then Charles? Then I want to discuss maybe next meeting.
Yeah, great insights, everyone. Especially I wanted to talk about the one thing that just sort of distills the Carl Jung thought. One sentence would be, it's hard to love other people when you don't love yourself. And love yourself, forgive yourself, and then you can have that compassion that we talked about in the book of John. You can have more compassion, more forgiveness for other people. But it's very difficult if you don't or can't love yourself and forgive yourself. And as far as the trauma idea goes, yeah, I think it's hard to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. I think that works if the trauma isn't too deep or ongoing. And actually there's you know, a lot of studies about this and how it affects your decision making and your goals. And it profoundly affects your ability to think clearly, make decisions, and have goals, and to have even basic hope. So that's when, if you're in that situation, then, you know, you might want to get the professional help. There's a lot of it online too. That's really great and free if you know how to look for it, and books, of course. And the other point I wanted to make was there's a systems therapy. It's called Bowen, BOWEN, family systems therapy, because someone brought up the idea of the family and the changes in the family, and they are phenomenal changes from when I was born. So it's very unsettling, and to a lot of people, and it's not just the family, it's across the board, it's everything, and everything's moving very fast in terms of life itself and all the changes and ways we have to adapt now to new models and ways of living. So I think, you know, Bowen Systems talks about the idea of the family actually is an emotional unit. It affects the individual, so that he was a psychiatrist, by the way, so a doctor and a psychologist. And he developed a whole theory. It's got 8 axioms, if you will. I won't go into them, but just to say that, you know, the identified patient is often needing help, is often not the problem. It's created by the family system, which is ill, and that can be generational as well. And so if you've got a mental illness, it can be passed along, not genetically per se, but through behaviors and, you know, different ways of selecting out certain people to carry this for the family, and different ways. He analyzed the family unit as an emotional unit, and that it's generational. And so, you know, and some families are healthier than other families, but it's just an interesting way. It's Murray Bowen, MAURYBOWEN, family systems therapy.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because what happens is the external, what the family's behavior starts to influence what you would do, your values, right? As opposed to actually where you're figuring out what you value. Now, so let's just say the family's behavior is something that is unhealthy. right? If you understand what you value, then you can make that behavioral change and not necessarily behave like the environment that you're in. And this is big, this is important on a more broad scale, is that sometimes in societies, they value certain things. We value, things like success, however, in financial terms, more than say success in personal terms. But if you have to come to the understanding of what it is that is most important to you, then your behaviors can change, because then you start to say, am I acting in accordance with what I think is the most important thing? And if you're not, then maybe what you're saying, your words don't match your actions. Either way, it reveals something that allows you to then change. And that's the real heart of the point of the exercise. I like the example that the family has a huge influence on behavior, because they are your family will, and how the family's structured will also have a huge influence on your behavior. But
Yeah.
again, this is where I think understanding your values really is kind of critical.
Yeah, I want to chime in very quickly. I think what Ella mentioned is very critical, because for Richard Williamson, even though they're poor, but the most valuable thing about that family is very healthy family, and the guy have very strong value system passed on to his kids, that he wants them not only be successful but mature themselves. They want to go to college, study different skills. I think it's so important for people to have that support system. And I think a lot of society, the young people have the problem is the family. They don't have a solid family value to pass on to them. It's much more critical than the wealth. Actually, we find a lot of people have, even in very rich family, they're very chaotic, then they end up damaged themselves psychologically. And so anyway, this is a very good point. We could look into the book. If you can share in the text, the name, and we can study more later.
Charles has been waiting patiently, so why don't we go to Charles and then Brian?
All right. Thank you, Joe, for that. So I guess this, when I saw this on the last minute, the topic of this meetup, it's about the practical uses of what we learned and integrated into our system, which, like caught my interest. So I would like to thank you for having this, this wonderful topic. Now, I have some questions. First is the exercise on clarification of value. So the question would be, how frequent do we have to use that? Like if we did like clarify, do the exercise this year, now we already found out that, okay, this is our value, our goals, everything. Now, I know that value changes over time, like it is time bound. I'm not sure if it's like fixed or is there a time element to it, but as you age in this life and gain experience, you change. So what is the best strategy on the time? When do we like make a follow-up? Is it like a month later?
Well, I think it's the value may change based on what you discover about yourself. However, if you put down something like friends or family or even career, the form may change. You may go from being a son to a father, or to, your role may change, but the underlying values should be the same. I mean, usually it can change based on your discovery, but it doesn't have to. It may be. Go ahead, Jang.
Yeah, because actually the chart mentioned it. How often should you do this audit? I think that's your question. It's when you feel bored, when you feel you are not fulfilled. So when you have this struggle, then it's time to redo it, find out, what's your next move. Yeah.
And I would also say that when your actions really don't align with what you're you've identified as your value. That's the most important thing. If you really want to do something else other than what you've kind of outlined as your value, then you probably have identified the wrong value in that particular instance. And goals are very different. So I want to be very, be exact with, it's important to be exact with language, because this works as true with corporations. They don't outline their values and then their goals and then their objectives and then their initiatives, and how those definitions are actually critical. Like, so that is a whole thing that I have a problem with. But
I want to say very quickly, because I was listening to NPR. There's this big consulting firm. They actually said their value is sustainability. That's how they attract a lot of people who are very passionate about it. But then people really work for them find out their biggest clients, actually the oil company. They help them to be more efficient. Actually, that's how they make most of the money. So the sustainability is more like their marketing strategy. But unfortunately, because they use this, they attract a lot of people who really integrity people, and they end up exposure to companies' problems. So that's another thing for company as well. When you have a value, you need to the integrity. You don't really tell other people, I value the family because that sounds good, but you don't actually do it, then people will find out. I think the same as company. Anyway,
Yeah. If I could just add one more thing. In addition to that, I think you have to ask yourself, why is that your value? Not only like, is this your value, but why? Make it personal for you. And think about it, because a lot of our values are stemmed down from our family. And that may be great, and they might have instilled this in you as a child because you didn't have an understanding of values. But now as an adult, you got to ask yourself why. And if a value doesn't seem like, if it's a value that you had before and you see it so less so now, why has it been devalued? Why has that value been devalued? And ask yourself those questions. And I think that gets you there, because I mean, and as far as a time frame, I think that just goes along. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. I think it's like Joe says, if you're noticing that your actions are not aligning with your values, or if you're like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I working at this company? Why am I I know this is going to sound strange, but why am I with my family? Like, ask yourself the why questions, because that's what will get you there. And they will come, I think, as a natural flow in time, as you change, as you grow. Hopefully you're growing and changing, and it'll just come. And then just ask yourself those questions.
Brian, yes. But values is a very complex thing, because there's also things like capabilities and all those other things that come into it. But anyway, Brian, let's come to you.
Okay.
So I want to thank you all too. I was really impressed with the quality of the work, the choices you made in putting this together. It's a very broad and fertile field, I think, as indicated by the discussion this evening, and there's still plenty to get into. Just a couple thoughts that occurred to me along the way, using just a couple things. One was, I regretted there aren't more young people, because yes, I think that really it is, I'm still working on purpose, because in some ways I've already fulfilled purposes. I'm moving on to the next, and I don't know what the next one is. But I think that the young people today, maybe some of you have children and can comment, I almost implicitly have different purposes if they were to think about it and talk about it, because they have different opportunities. They see the world differently. And so that would be, I think, a nice insight for us. The second thing is kind of a follow-up on that, but it is a separate point. I think a lot of them probably do not relate or my own sense is they do not relate well to the agonies we went through as regards our career choices. Because they don't have those choices, or they reject all of them and they want to put their priorities on a different arena. That's just a sense I have. I'd like to get more feedback on that. Then the other thing is putting on my Stoic hat, borrowing Joe's. I'm not sure the hat really fits. I don't think I understand Stoicism well enough. But if you look at the goals that were outlined in this book, my suspicion is that a lot of the goals and the frameworks, the terms it uses are already kind of dated. It's kind of a careerist point of view. And obviously everybody's got a point of view. I had a careerist point of view in my course, but I think that, maybe a younger person would come up with a very different framework to look and think about these things. But the more directly to the Stoicism point, how many of these goals that are outlined in these like levels of achievement or whatever, levels of I forget what the term he used. How many of those are in your control and how many are not?
Oh, that's a great point. Oh.
And I just, most of this, a lot of what I heard being outlined, it needs to be tempered with the understanding that these things are not within your control.
Well, the thing is that virtue for the Stoics is the goal. So Stoicism, so that is within your control, and that's all that matters, and that's necessary and sufficient for happiness. So what you're saying, okay, let's just say the idea of, let's use the example of being a friend, right? Being a friend, you can be just. You can be, in fact, that would be one of the chief things that you should aim at as part of that process. So as well as, demonstrating temperance with your friends as well. These are all virtues that you can practice and cultivate, and they're all within your control. Everything else, now the results are not, but yeah, so that's the beauty of Stoicism, is that virtue is necessary and sufficient for happiness. Therefore, if you're looking at all of your relationships and using virtue as the goal, then you should be okay. Technically.
Maybe you need a goal to be practicing and developing these virtues.
Yeah, exactly. The practice, I think, is so critical.
Well,
and I have a question, Brent.
That is.
You said which one is not under your control? Personally, I see it's all under our control in some way.
Well,
I think, okay, that's a good point. Let's just take purpose, for example. Yeah. Yes, you can have a purpose, but if you're getting nowhere with it, like you can't find a job, or you can't start a business, or you can't earn money with it, then you need a new purpose if you need a job or money. So yeah, that's the triangular, you have to survive, then you can develop the next tiers. And I think I have 2 high school kids. I found our education system now is very practical. They have the 16 personality test in the high school. They actually have their career match. And I think they did a great job to tell kids what's their career, what can find job, what can make money. But personally, I think they're a little bit too practical. So it seems people are like my friend's kids that her kids love drawing. He said, I don't want to be an artist. They can make money. They're starving. Then you don't want everybody to be artists. But I think at early age, you already defined. And our high school is prepare kids go to college. Middle school is about college, find a job. And we see, a lot of new generation, they no longer define their life as jobs, and they create their own jobs. I just think the education always one step behind. It's just, they train the people to be obedient, find a job, be practical, not dream big. Personally, I think when you dream big, even you don't accomplish that big dream, you just step lower. It's still bigger than what you're trying to. I see you actually achieve more when you dream big.
even you may not accomplish what you want, at least when you step lower, it's still higher than if you don't try. That's my opinion. I think it's always a balance, you know, when you're out of touch with reality, which is dangerous. But when you're too practical, then you don't fulfill your potential. That's what I've observed with education.
Yeah, that's a great, honest, I agree with that. I'd say look back at the different terms he threw out or he put out in his book, the frameworks. Like you gave us the 2-word summary of purpose, which is affecting change and having impact. That is not within your, entirely within your control. So I think that this is an ambiguity that it needs to be thought about and appreciated in the way you just outlined. It ties into that, the difference between the center and the periphery. You don't necessarily have control over the periphery.
Charles, actually, you've been waiting patiently, and then Julie actually has a. And then I want to just go over closing, kind of get
Okay,
some
just
opinions going forward.
quick question. It's like I guess there was a mention a while ago about the by discovering our value, do we need a guru or a third party to to discover it? If that is the case, then how do we find? Is there a way to find that right guru, master, teacher that could unfold for us the discovery, or do we still adapt the what we call the autodidactic? I think it's that autodidactic means that a person does not need any teacher or anything that to to learn or to discover. Thank you.
I'll let Zhang answer that because my answer is going to be pretty straightforward.
So I think if you have a guru or mentor, you're lucky. But for a lot of people, you just don't have it. Then you have to figure out yourself. And personally, I never have a mentor myself. And I think it's actually good for me. My husband just opposite way. He always find a mentor or have a coach, career coach, everything have a coach. Like you can't let people spoon feed you every day. I think when you figure out yourself, you actually learn how to learn. To me, it's more effective. That's why we do this psychology study instead of go to a therapy. Is that you can't give power out to other people to treat you. You could actively treat yourself by studying psychology, study yourself. And I guess people have different approach, but my opinion is figure out yourself. You learn, it takes a longer time, harder way, but you learn more through the process.
I think I'm falling in the middle. I think if you can find someone to mentor you that you admire and you've seen their work and you see how they are as a person, if that's the person you want to be, then you follow that person. I think also too, there is a strength in figuring it out yourself. Like I could look at people and get inspiration, right? I could get inspired by people, but I think a lot of the people that I'm inspired by, I don't know them personally. There's only a couple people that I'm inspired by that I know personally, and I develop friendships with those people. But other than that, I think if I'm inspired by them, I mean, in the age of YouTube and everything, you can find speeches by them, you can listen to them, but ultimately, I've been labeled as uncoachable, and in a sense, I like that because that means I can march by the beat of my own drummer, and I can learn from people. I can admire people. Like for instance, I admire my boss. I mean, she's a powerful woman. She's cognizant of people's needs. She's loving, she's kind, she's caring, but she's also very strong and very confident. And when you go to this person, you have to be on point. But at the same time, I I don't consider her like a guru or anything. I think you can learn from many different people. Many different people and situations can be your teacher. So I don't think it's necessary, but I'm not knocking it either.
Who was up next? Actually, I think that there was someone in the chat
Me.
prior. Yeah, go ahead, please, Julie.
I just want to say Les Brown said that most heart attacks happen on Monday morning and Sunday night, and that people work just hard enough to not get fired, and bosses pay just enough so that they don't get quit on. And he talks about, if you're not doing your dream and you know what it is, why aren't you doing it? And the formula, like I said, is kind of like what you guys are talking about tonight, designing a plan, which includes, having the right mindset. It includes mentorship. It includes OQP, only quality people. I mean, he definitely has a formula for helping people, get to that place where they're living their dreams. So he's on YouTube a lot. Thanks.
What's her name? Can you put on the text chat?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, thanks.
Up next, we have, actually, it's Dave followed by Ella.
Yeah, just a thought that a mentor you may not be thinking about might be your boss. And because they have a really selfish reason to help you develop. If you develop, become a better employee, you're going to produce more and make him or her more money. But other things you might, see, maybe a religious leader or just a friend or someone you respect. You might even ask someone that you maybe even know a little bit. But if anybody asked me to be a mentor, I'd be glad to help them. Maybe that's one of my problems. But no, ask around. I suspect you could probably find a mentor pretty easily.
Ella, do you want to go ahead? And I will answer at some point.
Sure. Actually, this is to a comment that you had made, Joe, a lot earlier, but also it was brought up again by other people in different ways. But we were initially talking about the dysfunctional family and somebody being identified and so forth, and Bowen family systems. And the actual goal, you are correct, Joe, is something that he calls differentiation. So that you want to remain in the family, remain in contact with the family, unless there's some type of abusive situation going on. Of course, not in that case. But you want to maintain contact as you grow, as you individuate, and become your own person. And he has strategies where you can, maybe you're not getting along with your mom or your dad, or your sister, but you can still keep contact with your first cousins and sort of things, because your emotional unit, you're still making contact with the family. Now they will make contact with each other. So you're a part of that family unit. You're a living part of it. You're not estranging. You're not cutting off. You're doing according to your goals, your objectives. You're living your life, and yet you're not cutting off. So I think that was a really good point that you made there. And I think it's everyone's individual level. If you come out of a really bad, traumatic situation, there's nothing wrong with getting help. Absolutely nothing. In fact, that's what I think the most reasonable thing to do is. But if you don't need it and you're at a higher level because you've worked through a lot of these things, or maybe your family was a little more, provided more support for you in some ways, then okay, of course, you can learn from philosophy, science, groups like this, a lot of different venues in life. You could study all kinds of things, biology, anthropology, and just learn about yourself. And I think there are a lot of resources out there, but it depends on where you individually need to begin.
Yeah, very good point, Ella. I think what I found, the reason we want to have this meeting, because I found from my landmark training, is the group learning. Because we're all looking for similar things in life, but with our limited time and energy, sometimes, it's not as efficient. That's why I think the group of people has similar goals, when they share our resource, we get so much quicker, we get compound effect. That's why I think the reason we're doing this, and it's great, people like you with, you know, your own knowledge and share with us, very beneficial for everybody here. Thank you.
So, thank you, everyone. For their input. And as far as, finding, I do have some suggestions as finding a guru. I always looked for people that that put a lot of content out for free and that don't seem to have any ulterior motives, and that's what I've found in the modern Stoic movement. Yeah, Al, just really quickly, coming back to the point that you're making about the differences, the very important difference that I was making between value and goal is that you have to have the value first. You have to understand what it is that kind of what you value as far as, is it your family? Or, some people are going to answer monetary things, and that's okay. That's what they value. It's not going to lead to, in my opinion, won't lead to happiness, but if they're materialists, more power to them. Then they have goals based on that. And then they go through a process of having objectives and initiatives, and it gets kind of like complicated. But it was a very good point in talking about that within context of the family as well. This is why it's important that we get the language right when we're talking about what is it that we value, is it that a goal is, what is it that is an objective, what is it that is an initiative. And then you have to look at things that you can change, things that you can't change, and things that you can do a little bit better. And it's a framework that you can kind of put together, and if you can almost draw it out to get in, because there are going to be parts of your life that you fundamentally cannot change. So almost a serenity prayer aspect to it. But then you also have a set of principles that you can develop, a set of principles that underline your values, which is really important too. So again, let's just make the easy example of Stoicism for me. And then what are the principles? Well, the principles, your goal is virtue, your value is virtue. Then what is it? Well, then there's the cardinal virtues. So you have justice, wisdom, courage, temperance. Those are what you aim at. That allows you to make a decision. So it's important to have those principles, and then everything else underneath that is something you can cultivate. I can be charitable because I'm just. I can do those, these are other virtues that I can kind of cultivate in order, but they, you have something to think about. When I have a decision to make in a relationship, the thing that I'm thinking about first is probably justice, or what's the wise thing to do, I can give specific examples about that, but that's just the basic idea of what I'm saying, is that you have a value, have a set of principles that help guide your actions. Your actions have to align with your values. And then from there, you have goals and initiatives and things along those lines. So this is the second one of these meetings. Hopefully we can, we're planning to have speakers at most of these. Ella, you actually probably be interested in. One was a Carl Jung expert that we've been trying to talk to and bring in. And so we're going to see what his schedule is. And a lot of them are going to have covered things at 52 Living Ideas. Because again, what we're trying to do is take what we've learned from 52 Living Ideas and extract that, what in a practical way, how does, some of the Jungian approaches impact our lives? How can we use them? This is just, again, about designing your life. This made sense. There's we did a value exercise. Geng was going through the book Why. So we did that this month. But we are seeking speakers that have spoken at 52 Living Ideas and other places as well, that will help us, kind of this will be more of a 20-minute presentation, then breakout rooms, then coming back, and then we'll be we'll be a little bit more focused next month, hopefully. But I thought tonight was a great session. Geng or Evanique, do you have any closing remarks?
I just want to say thank you, everybody, for understanding through the technical glitch. And I'm just curious if anybody has any ideas or anything that they want to cover under this umbrella of designing your life. I know there's a couple books that I've read that's helped me out, but if you have any suggestions, you can send a message to any of the three of us in Meetup. So it's just curious, just something to think about.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm glad we have much deeper conversation. It's so important to have the people who actually have the conversation. The conversation sometimes is not the topic is not as important. The people who actually get into the conversation. One topic can get way deeper. So we're lucky to have the group of people here. We can explore deeper in this. And I think we may take maybe more time to, like somebody mentioned, the value contradiction, explore more to find out what our values are. And we're all also looking, I think today, Brian already shared, the True North. We're looking for people who actually have some expertise, guides from one area or the other one to help people to explore the value. So it may take a couple meetings before we get into more solid, but we are open to any suggestions, to how to make this meeting work better for you. Yeah, thank you.
That one of the things that I actually wanted to go over was, and then maybe we at some other point we'll go over it. It's just I do have my friend built somewhat of an extent, somewhat of a shall I say, well thought out spreadsheet where you go and you put your values in, everything populates, and then you score them between 1 and 10. And if some way you're scoring one against the other, you were to have a contradiction, it would let you know that you have a contradiction in your values. So again, the example I can provide that's so simple, if I put stoicism as my chief, my most important value, but then I have physical health underneath that, and all of a sudden I do a score and I say, okay, this is my top value, and then I score my physical health above my stoicism, it will spit that out and say, look, there's a contradiction between what you're saying. And that's actually a really important thing, because it shows you that when you actually put numbers to these things, that you're starting to say, well, what is it that it's really forcing you to say, what is more important? And then it helps you allocate your time a little bit more. Maybe I can demo that at some other time. I probably should have demoed it tonight.
Yeah, let's try it next meeting, maybe. I think that's great to do some exercise. Maybe we share the link. People can practice before the meeting. They can share some stories too.
It's a very, very, it's a very good tool for ranking. Actually, you could rank anything for it, even if you were on a project or something and you wanted to rank what was most important as far as priorities go. I
think Sophia wants to talk. Should we let her talk? Sophia.
Go ahead, Sophia. Do you have something to say very quickly?
Yes, thanks for everybody. Only in terms of suggestions that you asked, I think one of the book that is very good in terms of designing life that we are talking about is the book by James Hollis. It is called An Examined Life. And the good thing about it is that it is on audiobook, and you can actually, each chapter is like 15 or 10 minutes. And that's really a great maybe part that we listeners in this meetup, we can see or listen or read before coming, and maybe as part of common ground for talking about something. That's a really, really good book, An Examined Life by James Hollis.
Okay, great. Yeah, we will look into it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, really quickly, Ella, do you have something to share?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to second that James Hollis comment. He is a Jungian. He has a Jungian background. He's
I have that
very
book.
easy to understand. James Hollis, Hollis. I've heard him speak several times. He's very, very good. I would recommend it as well. Good
So-
suggestion.
Yeah, I actually have that book. Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, second half of your journey.
It
I
is.
think
It is exactly something that can match with. I mean, hopefully, this meetup group.
Well, we definitely know some Jungian experts that we can reach to, and maybe they can speak to that for a little bit. We're going to work hard to get the schedule in line. Again, if you have any suggestions, please send your suggestions to one of us, one of the organizers. We'll make sure that they get out there. And everybody, thanks for staying this evening, even despite the unfortunate,
difficulties.
Yes, technical
yeah,
difficulties.
the unfortunate technical difficulty.
Which is out of
Right.
control, out of our control. We need to agree with our own control, I guess.
No, I think actually it was under our control. You just
Hey,
needed to click.
throwing me
you-
under
you-
the
I-
bus.
I
We've
think
talked about this, Joe.
you could have clicked that button a little, so that was completely under our control.
No, there was a button
anyway,
there.
so anyway,
We'll talk
but-
about this later, Joseph.
all right, take care, everyone.
Under the
Okay.
bus, Joe, just under the
Mhm.
bus. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Night.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.